Hey, what is going on, guys? It's DK back at you with another video here to break down the USFL Week 3 main slate. We still have some pretty decent sized contests up top, 25K to first in the big one. If you guys are new to the channel, welcome. I do make content for USFL, for NBA. I cover Prize Picks, which is the sponsor of today's video, and NBA Top Shot. Like I said, Prize Picks, if you are a new user, you can use my discount code DKDFS for a 100% match up to $100. I've been giving some picks over on Twitter for USFL. They all hit last week, which is great. There's a pretty big edge. It's all about information, right? So the reason we took the under on these three players was Michigan called up a third running back. So they had 3 active running backs. And Philadelphia called up a third running back, where a majority teams only had 2 running backs. So that's why we took the under in all 3. They all hit. However, they did give Colbert the DNP, even though he was dressed, because I guess he didn't play a snap. But, the other 2 hit with ease. So make sure to follow me on Twitter. I'll be giving some picks on there as we get, injury reports. Usually Thursday and Friday is when we do get those. And then as far as DFS goes, we did have some big winners. Congrats, Tommy. He turned, $17 into almost $1,000. That is a phenomenal ROI. Me, however, I've actually missed in tournaments the first 2 weeks in GPPs. I had Tiamu last week, who was super a big letdown. Frustrating to watch that game, but I've had better success so far in the showdown. But hopefully I will have a big night or big week in GPPs for the main slate on week 3. So if you guys are looking for more in-depth content, I do offer that on patreon.com. I'll have player pool videos for the main and the late showdown slate, a live stream, cash plays, GBP plays, core plays, if-then statements. Also, I do post all these stats over on my Patreon, nice color-coded. So this is just running backs, for example, data from PPF. But, this is pretty important information. I post all of this over on patreon.com. Okay, so let's talk about this 4-game slate. Let's first go over the Vegas odds. So Tampa Bay and Houston's the first game here. We got 39 over under. Tampa Bay are 1-point favorites. Birmingham and New Orleans is the highest projected scoring game. And I think that makes sense. It's a 44.5 over under, with New Orleans being 3.5-point favorites. Pittsburgh and Michigan's a 38.5 over under. Michigan are 2.5-point favorites. Lowest total, and that also makes sense. Michigan, more of a ground and pound team. Same with Pittsburgh. And then New Jersey and Philadelphia is the late game on Sunday. It's a 40.5 over under, and Philadelphia are 1-point favorites. Okay, so we'll start off with quarterback. And at quarterback, a lot of teams did split snaps. So there were 5 quarterbacks that played 100% of the snaps. Shea Patterson, Brian Scott, Josh Love, Jamar Smith, and Kyle Slaughter. We know DeAndre Johnson, Luis Perez for New Jersey have been splitting the quarterback snaps. If they continue to do that, it's really hard to play either of them. For Tampa Bay, like I said, Tiamu really did not play well. He didn't have the best luck either. A lot of drop passes from his wide receivers, but they played a little bit of Brady White, mainly in garbage time, though. And then for Houston, they did somewhat split the snaps. Thorson played about 70%. Kenji Bahar played about 20%. So there were some, 3 teams actually that used multiple quarterbacks. So I think we'll want to focus on the teams that, are only using one quarterback. Now, top end, I still think you can consider Tiamu. I think he'll be very low owned. He was one of the most popular plays in high stakes. I think it was for a good reason, right? He's a guy that has rushing upside. We saw it more so in week 2 than we did week 1. He just didn't have a lot of luck, a lot of drop passes. I would think he bounces back, but definitely more of a contrarian play. Shea Patterson did play 100% of the snaps. However, he didn't look great, under 50% completion percentage. So definitely more of a contrarian play as well. The sweet spot here is kind of this mid-range, I guess. So like Brian Scott, Philadelphia is a team that wants to air it out. And they threw 36 times now back-to-back games. We did see a little bit of rushing upside from him too, running one into the ground. So I think Scott, I talked about liking him a lot last week. I think the ownership will jump, but obviously I think he makes for one of the better plays. Kyle Slaughter as well. New Orleans has been a pretty pass-heavy team. Doesn't really have the rushing upside. Also got a little bit banged up, so we'll keep an eye on the injury report for him. But this is projected to be the highest scoring game, and New Orleans is also one of the more dynamic offenses, I think, in this league. Jamar Smith, keep an eye on Magoo news. Magoo missed last game, so they had to call up an emergency quarterback as the backup. If Magoo plays, then I think there's a chance to get split snaps. But if Magoo's once again out, I think you would see 100% snaps with Jamar Smith. And the positive here is the rushing upside, right? He is really a guy that can get it down in the ground. He had 30 yards on the ground last week. And then Josh Love. So it wasn't awful. Threw the ball 39 times, surprisingly, for Pittsburgh, who was more run-first team. I think you can consider him, but definitely more of a contrarian option. Now, running back, like I said, it's all about opportunities, and things can change from when I make this video, right? We saw a couple of teams call up another running back and had 3 active running backs, so things can definitely change, but we want to focus on opportunity, really. So, starting at the top end, I think B.J. Emmons is kind of just fine. I do think he'll be a little bit over-owned. Percentage-wise, he played about half the game. I do think he's the better of the two backs between him and Washington. Did have 4 targets. So I think he's a fine option, but he has gotten in the end zone. Or he didn't get in the end zone last week, but I think he's a fair play. Might be a little bit over-owned. Darnell Holland actually barely played last game. Again, Philadelphia did technically have 3 active running backs too. Stevie Scott from Michigan, like I said, they had 3 active running backs, and he only had 7 carries, so a little bit of a tough time to go there. Now, TJ Logan, once again, I've been all over this guy the first couple of weeks. Now, he's not like he's playing a ton of the snaps. He's splitting it pretty evenly with Jordan Ellis. However, he is clearly their pass catcher, and they actually run a lot of screens to TJ Logan. And we know Draftkings full point PPR, that does boost the appeal to Logan. I will say he has gotten a little bit lucky with touchdown variants. He's gotten back-to-back touchdowns so far. Don't think that continues, but the involvement in the pass game makes me like him a good amount. Groshek and Madre London, the 2 running backs here for Pittsburgh. I'm not as confident with this Pittsburgh offense, even though they did have a better week last week. I think, Groshek would be the preferred target. He played a bit more than Madre London last week, did have 18 carries as well, but not in love with it. Birmingham, you have Tony Brooks-James, played about half the snaps, kind of just a neutral play to me. Dawkins, so him and Thompson are splitting the duties, but Thompson has been playing more. The only downside with Mark Thompson, however, he's really not involved in the passing game at all. Now, CJ Marable, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I probably should learn that, but I think he stands out as a decent play here at 6K for Birmingham. So played about half the game, but he has been involved in the passing game. So I think he's a fair option. 2 targets there back-to-back weeks. But one guy that really stands out, I think will be popular, but for good reason, is Trey Williams. He's only 5'6". Now, sure, he only had 9 carries. But like I said, it's a passing game involvement, right? 4 targets and 5 targets in the first couple weeks. And he played the most out of any running back, playing at 67% of the snaps. He ran a route on 81% of the time. So Trey Williams really stands out. Jordan Ellis, I think, is a fair play. He's more the bruiser, right? They have a Thunder Lightning. He's the Thunder aspect of it, which is not great for DFS because he's not going to be involved as much in the pass game, where Logan is more the pass catcher. But, if he pounds one in the ground, he can have a pretty good game because he'll be more of the early down back. So definitely have some consideration there for Ellis. Outside of that, again, if Michigan continues to only run 3 continue to have 3 running backs, have a hard time going to a guy like Scarlett. Paul Terry, so Philadelphia, again, they had 3 active running backs. Colburn did not play, and Holland barely played. So we'll keep an eye on this news if maybe they only have 2 running backs here. But Paul Terry was pretty heavily involved, and he's only 3.4K. Played 64% of the snaps last week, but that could be subject to change depending on the status of the other 2 backs. So, like I said, what I say now could definitely change depending on those injury reports. So, always important to follow me on Twitter. I'll be giving some information out there, giving some prize picks as well. And then Patreon, I have all this information posted as well. All right, at wide receiver. So, wide receiver, like I said, kind of like running back, it's all about opportunity. So, there's a few teams that ran their receivers or pretty tight rotations of receivers. So one of those teams was Philadelphia. Let's just start there. We have Gray and Roland miss last game. So they only really played 3 wide receivers, Philadelphia. DeAndre Overton played 100% of the snaps. Jordan Sewell played 100% snaps. And Maurice Alexander played 98% of the snaps. Now on Twitter, I gave out one of my favorite contrarian plays was Maurice Alexander. He was 1% owned and went for 29 fantasy points, a complete slate breaker. So that was massive. And the reason I liked him was he was the flat man price. He didn't play the previous week, but if you looked at the roster, Philadelphia, like they were very thin at wide receivers. So that was my reasoning for liking Maurice Alexander, and it paid off in a big, big way. So Swell, I think it's Sewell or Swell. Alexander, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing some of these names, and Overton are all good options. Then Bug Howard got a pretty big snap increase last week with Philadelphia being thin at wide receiver. He played on over 80% of snaps, did have 5 targets. And like I said from my week 1 video, he's a converted wide receiver. So if Philadelphia only has those wide receivers active, again, only 3 wide receivers, I think you got to be, you got to like the Philadelphia guys. So Philadelphia was the team I wanted to start with. Michigan also ran a relatively tight wide receiver group. They played 2 wide receivers over 90% of the snaps. That was Lance Lenore and Devin Ross. Lance Lenore had 164 air yards and played 97% of the snaps and had 9 targets. So he's very heavily involved, even though the Michigan offense has struggled a bit. I think he makes for one of the better sped-up wide receivers. And then keep an eye on the news here. So Joe Walker wasn't active. Devin Ross, however, did play 90+% of the snaps. So I think he's a fair value. If they do activate Joe Walker or a couple, or like Jeff Badette, then would make me like Ross less. Still would have interest in Lenore, who's been very clearly their number 1 wide receiver. All right, Birmingham was another team that played a couple wide receivers very heavy. So you saw Birmingham play Victor Bolden 94% snaps, Marlon Williams 89%, and Osiris Mitchell 81%. And we kind of saw that from week 1 as well. So they've been playing their 3 main wide receivers a ton. And I think all 3 make for good options. Again, this is projected to be the highest scoring game. You've seen an average of 10 targets through 2 weeks, which is amazing for a guy like Victor Bolden. Now, sure, he's not getting targeting on the deep balls, but I think he has a pretty high floor, and they clearly want to get this guy involved. So I think Bolden makes for a very good spend up. Osiris Mitchell, back-to-back games of 7 targets. He's more the big body wide receiver, maybe a little bit of a higher ceiling. And Marlon Williams mentioned, that he was very involved week 1, even though he didn't catch a ball. Still played a good amount of snaps last week, did have a touchdown. So all 3 of the Birmingham wide receivers, I think, make for pretty good options. And then New Orleans was another team I want to mention because New Orleans has, been one of probably the best offense so far through 2 weeks. And there's one guy that really stands out. I think he'll be a popular value, but Jonathan Adams, I don't know if you watched that game. He had an amazing one-handed catch. I think he's actually one of the better wide receivers in this league, and he's only 3.8K. He played 82% of the snaps. They did play 4 wide receivers, but you saw 80+% of the snaps for Adams and 80+% for Sean Poindexter, who, of course, catches a touchdown the next week. I played in week 1. We literally did nothing. But yeah, Poindexter in play, a big body wide receiver, caught a touchdown last week. But I think Adams, for his price, looks like the best point per dollar play. He makes for a great option. Don't know if I get to anyone else. Former NFL wide receiver Taywan Taylor played this week. He did a 5 catch and 5 targets. I guess as a contrarian option, he's fine. Played on 63% of the snaps. All right. Was there anything else I wanted to bring up here? Let's see. I think that's kind of it for wide receiver. I guess for Tampa Bay, you did have a couple guys play 90+% of the snaps. You saw Jordan Lashley and Franklin play 90% of the snaps. You also saw Franklin get some wildcat duties. He had 4 carries, so they do want to get this guy involved. He's only 3.2K. And then Lashley's at 5.3. Did have 5 targets back-to-back weeks, but hasn't really done much with those targets. All right, and let's finish up with tight end. So tight end, it was a big week for week 1, not as much for week 2. There's still a couple guys that I think are viable here. Like I said, Buck Howard, probably one of the better options if Philadelphia has that same, only the 3 wide receivers active again. And he played 80+% of the snaps. So like I said, information is key here. Buck Howard, definitely a guy that we still want to have some interest in. Kerry Angeline had a big week 1, not as much week 2, but did have 3 targets. So again, playable, but a lot of these tight ends snap counts dropped. Sal Cannella still played a majority of the game, played on almost 90% of the snaps. He's 5.4K. He's in the New Orleans offense. Again, the targets did go down on him a bit. And then the guy that had the massive week last week did lose snaps. That was Cheyenne O'Grady. He played at like 100% of snaps week 1, only 60% week 2. So that's definitely a pretty big downgrade. Now, he is very clearly one of the better pass-catching tight ends in this league. But I would say all those tight ends are definitely more contrarian options. You can still go to them for tournaments, those guys I mentioned. But I think they're a bit riskier than some of the other wide receivers that we've talked about. So that'll wrap it up for the video today, guys. If you have been enjoying the USFL videos, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And like I said, follow me on Twitter. I'll be giving away some good information there. But thanks again, guys. Appreciate you guys as always, and I'll see you in the next video.